the webinar session and get your time to be active. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Fitra Juniarti. I'm here as the MC and moderator for this webinar with title The Pros and Cons of Russia's Attendance at G20. Before we start main event, I will announce the rules, which consists of the first is participants must active the camera feature. The second, participants are not allowed to active the microphone during the presentation. The third, participants are not allowed to scribble on the share screen. And fourth, participant can deliver question in question answer session using the raise hand feature and format like full name also institution followed by the question. The fifth, participants are not allowed to create any chaos or provocation. So we start our agenda. The first is an opening remark delivered by Mr. Aplidanciana Esos as International Politic Forum Executive Director. The microphone is yours.
Okay, thank you, Fitra Juniarti. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for Russian Ambassador to Indonesia, Miss Lyudmila Vorobieva, and my friend Ahmad Khairul Furqon. He will join as soon as possible. And thanks for all participants also. And in this afternoon, we want to talk or we want to discussion International Politic Forum, discuss about G20 in Indonesia. As we know, in the social media and the news or magazine or others, we can say there are many pros and cons about Russian come to Indonesia, G20. Example like Australia, example like United States and others country, they said boycott Indonesia to not give invitation for Russian embassy come to G20. But Russian government say Russia will come to Indonesia for participating in the G20. And maybe if you know, when International Politic Forum make this discussion, we have a great support from Indonesia people. Maybe Indonesia people always say "ura," like "ura," like that. Maybe you know, Mrs. Ura is like a Russian symbol. Maybe Indonesia people's like Russia. Maybe we don't know about. But when International Politic Forum make this discussion, we have a great support to make this discussion. That's why International Politic Forum proud and thanks for Russian embassy to come our discussion. We just want to know about maybe if you want to say about how about the Ukraine, maybe we will talk about the Ukraine. Maybe we will talk about Ukraine because the second speaker we will talk about the Ukraine and how about the Ukraine and Russia impact to our G20 and what is the national interest of G20 for Russia. And also, we just want to know in International Politic Forum is objective forum. We see the two sides, pros and cons. Okay, just it for me. And thanks from all participants, Miss of Russian Embassy and my moderator. Just it for me. And wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Mr. Sena, for the speech. Now we are going to arrive at the main session of today agenda, which is the webinar with the title The Pros and Cons of Russia Attendance at G20. The G20 Global Economic Forum that Indonesia will host is the center of global attention. It is referred to as the going war between Russia and Ukraine. Many countries have uttered their rejection of Russia's presence as a form of economic sanction of war. This led Indonesia to decide whether will invite Russia or express the ban. Furthermore, Besides of COVID-19 economy recovery will be the main discussion, also the impact of war on the economic between countries in the world. For that, let me invite our first speaker to deliver her material. Please welcome Her Excellency Ludmila Vorbevia as Ambassador of the Russian Federation to the Republic of Indonesia. Madam, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, and very good afternoon to everyone. As we say in Russia, здравствуйте. First of all, I would like to express my deepest appreciation for inviting me to your webinar dedicated to the G20. And I'm really privileged and honored to explain the position of Russia towards the issues that have been mentioned. I don't want to speak too much. Probably we could leave more time for the A and Q&A session. Just let me touch on probably three subjects. First of all, it's the Russia-Indonesia relations. Secondly, the situation in Ukraine, and finally, the G20. I would begin by saying that in Russia, we see Indonesia as our very good friend and partner among ASEAN countries, and of course in the Muslim world, because in a sense, Russia is a Muslim country too. We have a population of around 20 million, Muslim population of around 20 million people. We have 9 regions in Russia that are predominantly Muslim, and I would say that the Muslim population in Russia supports the policy of our president and our government very much. We have been enjoying very good relations with Indonesia for more than 70 years. In 2020, we were celebrating the 70th anniversary of our diplomatic relations. And this good cooperation and friendship started in the 60s when President Sukarno visited our country 4 times and became very close with our then leader Nikita Khrushchev. Especially our bilateral relations have they took a positive trend after 2003. When Ibu Megawati Sukarnoputri visited Russia and met with President Putin. Since then, we enjoy very active political dialogue. Last year, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, visited Jakarta, and also quite recently, Mr. Sergei Lavrov met with the Foreign Minister of Indonesia, Ibu Retno Marsudi, in China. Our presidents met several times in the last decade. President Joko Widodo visited Russia in 2016 for the Russian ASEAN summit, and he had very good meeting with the President Putin on the sidelines of the Russia ASEAN summit. Also, they met in 2018 in Singapore, and they had a telephone conversation 2 years ago how to fight COVID together. If we look at our economic and trade relations, they also have been on the rise. In 2016, our presidents have set the target for our bilateral trade to meet $5 billion. This target has not been achieved yet, but the trend is very positive. Last year, we've seen a growth of our bilateral trade by 40%, and it reached $3 billion. Hopefully, if the trend continues, we can achieve the target set by our leaders. We have joint investment projects. Again, maybe not enough if we look at our population, which is combined population, which is around 400 million people. but we have a big investment project in building an oil refinery in Tuban, in exploration of gas and oil reserves in Natuna. We have joint projects in IT area. Maybe you've seen, I'm sure you've seen Taxi Maxim, the online taxi services, and they are operated by a Russian IT company. That's just a few examples of our bilateral cooperation. Of course, we also have cooperation in education. Now we have around 700 Indonesian students studying in Russia, and we're providing scholarships, 261 scholarships per year, and hopefully in the years to come we will provide even more, because the demand is very big. We receive a lot of requests from Indonesians to study in Russia. So this is a very brief outline of our bilateral relations. If you are interested in more details, maybe I can answer the questions afterwards. So the second issue that I would like to highlight right now is what is happening in Ukraine. Unfortunately, the Western media and the Western governments have launched information war against Russia, or even information terrorism, preventing people in the world knowing what is happening, disseminating fakes and hoaxes about the situation in Ukraine, and of course the reasons of the special military operation that Russia is conducting in Ukraine. So first of all, we are not in a state of war with Ukrainian people, because we see Ukrainians as our brothers and sisters. We are very close with Ukrainians, and we are trying to do whatever we can to spare the civil population. In Ukraine, we're not targeting civilians. We are targeting military installations. And if you see videos in the Western media about houses being destroyed, or hospitals or schools, most of them are not true, and they are either staged or fake. The goal of our operation the targets of our operation have been very clearly outlined by our president, which is to protect the people of the regions of Lugansk and Donetsk, to demilitarize Ukraine and to denazify Ukraine. What we mean by that? Of course, it's not well known that the government in Kiev has been conducting a civil war against their own population in Lugansk and Donetsk since 2014. For 8 years, people were being killed in Lugansk and Donetsk, including civilians, women, children. 14,000 people died. That means that every day people were dying, and that didn't actually found any reaction in the Western governments or Western media. They were turning a blind eye on that, and on the contrary, they were pushing Ukraine actually into committing more aggressive acts against Lugansk and Donetsk. And the reason why Ukraine has been doing that, because in 2014, as a result of a very bloody and illegitimate coup d'etat, a Russophobic government came to power, and they started to oppress their own population. And for your information, practically half of Ukrainian population speak Russian, or all Ukrainians speak Russian, but half of Ukrainian population think of themselves as ethnic Russians. So to oppress Russians in Ukraine is something unthinkable, or trying to ban Russian language or Russian culture. It's absolutely unacceptable, and the regions that were and are mostly populated by ethnic Russians, of course, didn't agree and started to protest. And instead of trying to find a peaceful solution, the government in Kiev launched a military attack against the population of Lugansk and Donetsk. They tried to do so against Crimea, but Crimea had a referendum in 2014 and decided to go back to Russia. And Russia protected the people of Crimea. But the war was going on for 8 years in 2014. From 2014, Russia has tried to find a peaceful solution. We initiated the Minsk Agreements in 2014 when the leadership of Lugansk and Donetsk and the government in Kiev agreed to solve this problem inside Ukraine. These agreements actually provided a very clear roadmap how to solve this crisis inside Ukraine. Unfortunately, Kiev never fulfilled their commitment under the Minsk Agreements, and they were very much instigated by the West. And by the West, I mean, of course, the US and their allies. For 8 years, Russia has been trying to find a diplomatic solution, pushing Kiev to fulfill the Minsk Agreements and stop the war in Lugansk and Donetsk by asking our Western partners to push Kiev to do so, but there was no result. Now it has been proven that Kiev had the plans to launch a massive attack in March this year against Lugansk and Donetsk and even Crimea. If they did so, it would have meant much more bloodshed than actually we can see now, because Russian armed forces are trying to spare Ukrainians, but Ukrainian armed forces did never spare any Russians in Lugansk and Donetsk, especially. Meanwhile, from 2014, the US and their allies tried to turn Ukraine into an anti-Russian project, pumping arms into Ukraine, training Ukrainian army, and brainwashing Ukrainians into believing that Russians are their enemy. So in this crisis, Ukraine is, and it's a tragedy, of course, is a victim of the Western policies directed against Russia. And Ukraine is used as an instrument to attack Russia. We also tried to make our security concerns heard by the West. In December last year, we tried to sign, and we provided a draft of this document, an agreement on security guarantees for Russia, but we were not heard by the West. So, and the red line for us was, of course, to Ukraine to become member of NATO, which was the intention of the government of Zelensky. So these are the reasons of this operation, because we felt threatened by the West through Ukraine, and we needed to stop the bloodshed in Donetsk and Lugansk and to protect people who live there. Now, of course, if you want to hear more about that, I will be most happy to do so and answer your questions. Now I'm going to the probably to the third part of my presentation on the G20 issue. Actually, I don't quite agree with the title of this discussion, pros and cons of Russia's attendance of G20. Russia is a part of the G20, and Russia has been invited President Putin has been invited by President Joko Widodo to attend the summit in Bali, and so far he has expressed his intention to be part of this meeting. But of course, G20 is not only the summit. G20 is a process, and it comprises lot of meetings. If I'm not mistaken, 150 meetings are planned by Indonesian presidency, and Russian side has so far participated in the I would say all the meetings that were so far hosted by Indonesia, either offline or online, and we have the intention to participate. We, of course, from the very beginning, we have supported Indonesian presidency in G20. We support the priorities that have been defined by Indonesia. And of course, these are issues that are very important for global development, and it means the recovery of the economic recovery after the pandemic, the strengthening of the healthcare system, the digital transformation, the energy transition. These are issues that are really, really relevant, and G20 is the perfect forum to discuss these issues of global importance. And we support the position of Indonesia, which is very balanced and reasonable, that G20 should focus on the agenda that has been agreed upon, and political issues shouldn't be dragged into this agenda. Again, what will be the added value to divert the attention of the G20 participants from this very important economic and financial issues? And if there are opinions that Russia shouldn't participate or should be excluded from the G20 forum, first of all, how it is not the majority of G20 members. Secondly, there is no mechanism actually to exclude a G20 member. And the third point is, how can you try to find a solution for these very important issues without the participation of Russia? After all, Russia is the sixth biggest economy in the world, which accounts for about 3% of the global economy, is more than France or Great Britain. And we are among the three leading countries who produce oil and gas. We're one of the leading countries that produce wheat and other food products. We're a #1 exporter of wheat in the world. How can you discuss this kind of issues, for instance, food security, without the participation of Russian Federation, or energy issues? How would this be without Russia's presence? And of course, another thing that is very important. You know, we hear these opinions that, especially from Western leaders, that they don't want to sit at the same table with the leader of the country that invaded other countries. And it's a very blatant example of double standards, because do you know the only country that actually military attacked other countries, 30 other countries in the last 30 years? Is it Russia? No. Is it China? No. It's the United States. So do this leader mean that they don't want to sit at the same table with Biden? On the other hand, okay, you may not agree with what Russia is doing in Ukraine, but will it help to resolve the crisis if Russia is excluded Of course not. It will make things worse, and it is evident. And of course, we understand that there is a lot of pressure from United States and its allies on Indonesia's presidency and on other countries. But we know that Indonesia has a free and active foreign policy, and we appreciate that Indonesia is not giving in to this kind of pressure. So the last thing I would like to say, and I've read some remarks in the chat, and you mentioned the URA as a symbol of support for Russia. We, we really appreciate the attitude of Indonesians who support Russia, and we see a lot of support in the social media, where we are really thankful to people of Indonesia. And I think one of the reasons that because people of Indonesia do understand that this crisis is basically not about Ukraine. It's a confrontation between Russia and the US and its allies, because Russia doesn't agree to the right of a small group of countries to the global dominance, and the right of this country to dictate their own rules to the whole world to follow. So once again, we are really grateful to Indonesians who support us, and Ura actually is a great word. It's an expression of strong spirit, willingness to win, and also joy and happiness. So maybe I'll stop at that, and I'll be most happy to answer the questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, that was very nice explanation from the Russian ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia. How is the relationship between Russia and Ukraine, and the long history of the two countries until there was a war as we know it today, and how is Russia's position in G20, and what kind of cooperation is there in Russia with Indonesia. Thank you, Miss. Next, we move to the next speakers. There is Mr. Furkan from the Institute of Democracy and Education. Hello, Mr. Furkan. Have you joined?
Hello, thank you very much.
Okay.
Ms. Fitra Juniarti.
Okay, Mr. Furkan, how is Indonesian attitude in dealing with this situation? And also, how does Indonesia has an interest in voicing the importance of respecting international legal norms? Mr. Furkan, time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Miss Fitra Juniarti, as a moderator and mastering ceremony. Your Excellency, for the first, good afternoon, almost evening to Miss Lyudmila Jevorobiova. Sorry before if my spell of your name is wrong, because I don't know how to spell your name. And Your Excellency, to Mr. Sena. Mr. Sena is one of my best friends, and I trust him very well. He is clever. He's the diligent one in every single thing, in idea, in every single organization. And I'd like to present my presentation. I have some slides from IPF forum. Can you share my slide? Okay. Okay, thank you very much for the slides. Next. Okay, for the first, I would like to explain it from some theory, a theory that's a realism theory. As a Goldstein said, he has a side that as a state actor, the state has a psychology and always put the personal interest first and wants to get higher position in the world system. So I think this is explained to us that every single state want to be number one in the world system. And the second is this theory talk about the power and interest of country in the world. The state in realism side always talk about power and the position of their position in the world. And the third is state is a conflictual condition. State is a conflictual. The state is always has a worried feeling. The state always not good and not positive feeling to the other state. And the fourth and the last from the realism is the national interest. Every country want to its national interest to be achieved and can be fulfilled by every single state in every single country in this world. And the next slide. Okay. So the big question is why Ukraine wants to join NATO, whereas NATO and Ukraine for the distance is so far. Even Ukraine is more near. Even NATO is near from Russia, and why NATO wants and has a big desire to join. Ukraine has a big desire to join NATO. Geographically, it's clear that Ukraine is far away from the territory of NATO, as a NATO stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Moreover, this organization was actually used as a tool for World War. And this institution, NATO, the first it's made, it's for the balancing institution for the Warsaw Pact. So the biggest question for NATO is, it is relevant for now? The answer is depends. Actually, the answer is depends on who said that. Depends on who answer the Western country or who someone near has a psychology with Eastern Europe like that. And the next, because actually, if Ukraine join NATO, actually the ballistic rudal. Next slide. Sorry. Okay. Probability condition, because actually in 2008, the United States of America make a close relation with Ukraine government, and 2014 Ukraine chose to be close with NATO. Actually, if Ukraine join to NATO, ballistic missile that the station in Romania can be transferred, can be moved to Ukraine, which essentially it is a country that bordered directly with Russia. And of course, it will pose a serious threat. It will be serious threat to the country's sovereignty in the view of international security. Furthermore, this is related to psychology of the state as a relation theory said just now. I thought that the psychology of state is a conflictual, worried, and always has a negative side to the other country. So if the rudal ballistic move from Romania to Ukraine, the last border between Russia and the European Union is only Belarus. If the last border only Belarus, it will give some trade. It will give some trade to Russia. I think this is not only economic threat, but also security threat. So we all can imagine how the psychology of Russia as a great country in the Eastern Europe. Okay, next. Now, as I said just now, that Ukraine as a buffer zone of Russia to Europe, it's like same with Western Hemisphere in Doctrine Monroe that Western Hemisphere as a buffer zone of United States to the other countries. So actually, when viewed as a actually, Ukraine has never been Ukraine has never been area strategic of United States to international to national interest. So why the United States always want to close to Ukraine? When viewed as a geographically, Ukraine is an area of strategic interest of for Russia. Ukraine is a buffer zone between Russia and Europe, like the Western Hemisphere, is an area of America's strategic interest as the Monroe Doctrine. But after 2014 revolution, the Ukrainian government preferred to be close to NATO. That makes Belarus only buffer zone. Like I said just now, the Ukraine is there are two states as a buffer zone of Russia to European Union. That's Ukrainian and Belarus. If Ukrainian join to NATO, the buffer zone only in Belarus, and it will give some threat to Russia in strategic national interest. And next. So the big question is, Ukraine is a strategic interest of US? Actually, the answer is no. Actually, for the economic, Ukraine is an strategic interest of a United States. But every single in this world works is not about economic interest, not security interest only, but for the political interest. We know, we are all know that Russia and United States of America after Cold War has value war, like democracy, like a liberalism and communism. But I think it's not works today. But I think the Cold War is still open. I think like that. So as it known that NATO success in recruiting countries that had been in the Soviet communism environment, such as before Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, and Romania. So this success had made NATO more confident in expand its movement toward Russia. And 2006 confidently invite Ukraine to join NATO. Despite this fact, the many political observers explain that this wish has gone too far. This is too far for United States national interest. And now it's been proven when United States want to Ukraine join to NATO, and Russia give something small to Ukraine to prove that this will threaten to our national interest. Maybe Ms. Lyudmila just now said that actually, if Ukraine want to join NATO, it will give some threat to her country. So in the next slide, I think when Russia gives something small to Ukraine, but why many Western countries give some against? Next slide. When Russia has a conflict with Ukraine, when Russia has give something small threatened to Ukraine to inform that they are gets more threatened in national interest. Why? Australia, the United States of America, Turkey, British, and European Union against Russia even decline the Putin attendance to Indonesia. Why? The big question is why. And the comparison study is like when Israel against Palestine. In the next slide. The comparison study is Israel to Palestine. When Israel against to Palestine, when Israel occupy the Palestine, I think very small, very little Western country to inform that they are against Israel when many of people society has that many people of Palestine have been beaten by Israel soldier. And the second comparison study is when the United States of America against or occupy the Iraq with the reason that Iraq has a biological weapon, whereas it's never be proven. Whereas Iraq never be proven that Iraq has a biological weapon. That's the big question. And the next slide. Nah, so what Indonesia has what Indonesia should have a decision for this. I think Indonesia has a national interest. Indonesia now as a presidency of G20 2022, many states complain about the attendance of Putin in Indonesia, and Indonesia will get more confused. So what the decision for Indonesia? The best decision of Indonesia is use a diplomacy, and like Miss Liz Mila said just now, United States of America, Turkey, England, British, and Australia cannot decline the attendance of Putin because of what? Because Russia is a state has a big economy, and the logic of G20 is about the alliance of economic cooperation, and Russia has one of the big economy in the world. And the next. So the position of Indonesia is like this. European Union and the NATO is different with G20 logic, like that. The G20 is nothing more than an association whose economic interests are so. In terms of strategic interest and the security, the G20 organization does not have a great power in the term of security issue. The G20 is different from the logic of formation of the European Union and NATO, in which the position is an accumulation of the strength its member country. More than that, the EU or European Union is a region that has a great economic, political, security linkage. So I think the last I want to say is Indonesia can only carry out the diplomacy as a way to bring the conflict between the two countries to a halt. The result of the diplomacy can be brought to the United Nations General Assembly because historically, the United Nations issued the resolution called Uniting for Peace in 1950 during the War of Korean Peninsula. So, and the last slide, I have some quotes. Come to last slide. Next. Next, sorry. Now, this is my quote. I copy from John President Frederick Morris. I went into the army believing that if you want a peace, you must prepare for war. I now believe that if you prepare for war, truly, if you for war, you will get it. So now I wanna inform you that if you wanna get some peace in this world, you must prepare. You should prepare for the war, even for war for your own physically or for your country. So that's my presentation. Sorry if I have a many mistake in my presentation. Thank you very much for Mr. Sena, to Miss Fitra and Miss Lyudmila Forobiova. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Mas Furkon, for the very nice explanation about how East Indonesia attitude is dealing with this situation, and also how does Indonesia has interest in voicing the importance of respecting international legal norms. And then we enter to the next agenda, discussion session. According to the rules, I mentioned it before. If anyone wants to ask question, participants can deliver question using the raise hand feature, and you can chat us with format like full name, also institution, followed by the question. Okay, please, the participant, if you want to ask question, you can use the raise hand feature. I think there is Abdul Hamid. Mr. Abdul Hamid want to ask some question, and please, time is yours.
Okay. Thank you for having me. How is my audio? It's okay? Okay, actually my questions are already written in the chat, and I'm going just to read it now. Dear Ambassador Vorobieva, question number one, do you think that Indonesia is now under international pressure to side with Ukraine? Number two, with regard to the possibility of the absence of Russia or any member country in the Bali G20 summit, do you think that Indonesia is in difficult position to make it a success? If you do, what helps can you offer to make it easier for Indonesia to handle? Number three, with its military might stronger than the whole of Europe, I believe that Russia could sweep a small Ukraine in 2 weeks. The facts then show Russia has experienced difficulty in winning it until today. What do you think, Mrs. Ambassador? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Abdul, for the question. And next, there is Mr. Lut wants to ask question also. And please.
Thank you, Davitra. Good morning from Brussels, Madame Vorobieva, Your Excellencies. I live in Brussels, in Belgium here, and every day I meet Ukrainian refugees who come to Belgium. And yesterday, the UN announced 5 million people left from the country, plus 7 million has to leave their house internally in Ukraine. Also, I met Russian people here in Belgium. I talked to them about this, what happened in Ukraine. I understand your explanation as an ambassador to defend your political stand and telling that you are not in war with Ukraine. And for me, it is difficult to understand. And I heard not from the media, but from the people, from Ukraine and also from Russia, Russian people here in Belgium. Even they don't agree, the Russian people here in Belgium that I met, they don't agree to what is happening now in Ukraine, and asking your president to stop this. Also, the Ukrainian people here, we share food with them every day, and the situation is very difficult. Many of them are wife and children and old people, and their husband has to stay in the country to defend their right. So for me personally also, I'm very upset to see what is happening, people dying every day. And you said that you are not targeting civilian, but in fact, people are dying. every day. So how to prove your statement, Madam Ambassador? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ruth, for the question. And the last question for the first session, I will read with the question in the room chat. There is Yosia Saud Marilitua. Your Excellency, Mr. Ludmila Vorobevia, I understand Russia's position in this conflict that the NATO's army in Ukraine is direct existential threat towards Russia. But I also understand that this conflict directly led to the decline of world economic. Indonesia, as the president of current G20, wants to invite both sides, Russia and US. As US alien has been protesting, they possibly demanding Russia to take responsibility. Will Russia full participate on responsibility corporation framework if there's such agenda in G20 forum? Thank you very much for the 3 questions from the participant in first session. So I will invite the speakers to answer the question. Please, Mrs. Ambassador.
Well, actually, there's more than 3. So, thank you very much for this question. So the first one about the international pressure on Indonesia to side with Ukraine. Yes, of course. But, you know, actually, I would like to say that why just a small group of countries is proclaiming to be the whole international community. I'm sorry to say, my co-speaker, Turkey is not against Russia. You know, we have very good relations with Turkey. Turkey hasn't joined the sanctions against Russia. But my point is that, yes, there is, of course, pressure from the United States, from Europe, and their allies on Ukraine, and that's how actually United States operate. Nothing new there. Applying pressure and blackmailing countries. We've seen numerous examples of that, and actually economic sanction is another weapon against this or that country that they have used many times. But we see that Indonesia government, and we really appreciate that, is still conducting their free and active foreign policy and not giving in to this pressure, which is very strong, of course. So the second question is with regard to the possibility of absence of Russia. Do you think that Indonesia, to make it success? Well, you know, the recent meeting in Washington on the financial issues, where some of the members walked out when there was a Russian representative speaking, shows that the discussion can be still continued and be very relevant and substantive. That what Ibu, Ibu Minister of Finance of Indonesia stated, that still the discussions were very relevant. And I'm sure with the position that Indonesia has taken, the G20 will still be a success. Actually, we're quite flexible on how to have these discussions during the G20, and probably we can discuss some of the economic aspects of the crisis in, or humanitarian aspects of the crisis in Ukraine. On the on why the operation is taking more than 2 weeks, it's very easy, because we're sparing the civilians. We are advancing very carefully. We are trying not to hurt people. We're targeting military installations. That's the main reason. The other reason, of course, is that the Ukraine receives a lot of military help from outside. So basically the West, instead pushing Ukraine to reach an agreement with Russia, are just pouring some oil in the fire. And that just leads to more victims, of course. On the gentleman from Brussels, I'm not saying that a military operation is the best thing in the world, and that, of course, any military action is a tragedy, because if there's military action, you cannot avoid, unfortunately, people being killed. But that's what Russia is trying to do, to spare the civilians. You know that we have 1 million refugees from Ukraine. We are receiving refugees also from the Ukrainian side. And we are doing whatever we can to make them feel safe and to provide assistance to them. We're providing humanitarian assistance to Ukrainians. Wherever our troops come, they open humanitarian passages and distribute food and water for people there. On the contrary, Ukrainians are trying to prevent people from leaving through these humanitarian passages. Now you are saying that people are dying, but why were there no reaction when people were dying for 8 years in Lugansk and Donetsk? For 8 years, 14,000 people died. Where were the sanctions against Kiev? Where was this hysterical reaction of the West? Where were all these people now who are, crying that Ukrainians are dying, etc., etc.? And what about people of Donetsk and Lugansk? What about them? They suffered for 8 years. And finally, we're trying to help them and to stop the war. On the Russian people in Belgium, how many Russian people are there? Russia has a population of 146 million. How many Russians are in Belgium? It's a little minority, and they have the right to leave the country if they don't agree with the policy of our president and the government. But as I told you, 80% of Russians support what is going on in Ukraine. There's an overwhelming support of our president and of our government. And again, if you want to blame someone for this situation, blame the Western countries that have dragged Ukraine in this tragedy. They don't want to confront Russia directly, of course, but they don't have any pity on Ukrainians. They will fight against Russia until the last Ukrainian. The last question on the disruption of economy, again, what the influence on the global economic situation is not because of the operation that Russia is conducting per se. It's basically the economic sanctions that are imposed on Russia. I think now we have surpassed Iran and any other country in the world on the number of the sanctions that have been imposed. And also that raises the question, why is Europe, for instance, doing things that are hurting their own population? They are dismantling or smashing the trade system that has been established during the last decades. They're disrupting the supply chains, and not because Russia is doing something, no, but because of the sanctions. This is the direct result of the sanctions, and trying to exclude Russia from different international organizations and forums. That reminds me a little bit of an ostrich that is trying to bury its head in the sand and pretending that Russia does not exist if Russia doesn't participate in international organization. But it will not make Russia vanish from the world map or be an important player in the world. And all these attempts to isolate Russia, as the Western leaders are saying, that they are failing, because the G7 countries and their allies, they're not the whole world community. The vast majority of the countries have not joined this sanction hysteria by the West. Actually, not a single Muslim country has joined this sanction policy. Latin American countries, India, African countries, etc., etc. And again, we are ready to discuss this economic issues during the G20 summit. We're just not ready to drag in the, this groundless political accusation and information terror that has been launched against Russia. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Ambassador. Okay.
You can call me Mila.
Okay, Ludmila.
Ludmila or Mila, shortly.
It's very difficult.
Mila.
Ludmila. Okay, yeah. Miss Ludmila, thank you very much for the answer. And maybe we will invite the second speaker to answer the question, to give addition. Please, Mr. Ahmad Hoirul Furqan.
Sorry, can you repeat what the question is now? I forget it. I forget what the question is now.
Okay. Maybe I will read the last question from Yosua Sautmarutua about Indonesia as the president of current G20 wants to invite both sides, Russia and US, as US allies has been protesting the possibility, demanding Russia to take responsibility. Will Russia full participant on responsibility corporation framework if there's such agenda in G20 forum?
Okay. For the first, we should know about the logic of G20. We know the G20 is the accumulation, the accumulation strength of economic forum. So actually, if Indonesia want to make some good decision, if Indonesia wanna make some decision when the United States statement, when United States, Australia, and the British complain about the Putin attendance, I think Indonesia should silence only and don't give some sentences, because actually Russia is one of the big country in the economy. Russia one of the big country in military issue, and actually I think Russia has maybe I don't want to make this be sure, or how about someone think, but maybe I wish if President Putin comes to Indonesia to attend the G20 forum, Putin and the participation from Russia has some problem solving for this war between Russia and Ukraine. So if this war can be finished as soon as possible, it will make the assumption of the other country can be declined by the fact like that. So I think actually it will be so hard to come true because every single thing about the war is politics. Every single thing about war is a politic, and every single politic is what behind, not what in front of. So every single what behind communication between Russia, United States, Ukraine, I wish, or we as the society of this world, we are all wish that Russia, United States, Ukraine, North Atlantic Treaty Organization can make some communication and can solve this problem, can solve this war and finish this war as soon as possible. Maybe that's my answer, Miss Fitra.
Okay, thank you very much, Mas Furkon. So we move to the second session. And then again, if the participant wants to deliver the question, please using the raise hand feature, and you can chat us with format like full name, also institution, followed by the question. Okay. There is Mr. Arif wants to ask the question. Time is yours.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, Miss Mila and Pak Furkon, and also Mbak Fitra. I would like to ask to Mila regarding to this issue. Yeah, actually, I've been to Russia and then have got a good impression about Russia, not only the culture, history, science, and also the people. Yeah, but in this situation, my point is I would like to try to relate this conflict with the mass media and social media that the Western country persuade the bad image of Russia in this conflict. Yeah, my question is, how does Russia counter this mass media and social media? Yeah, as you know that like Western media have done with this action through film and then journals or something like that, but I haven't seen the counter attack of Russia through the mass media and also the social media. Thank you, Mila. Hope you can answer my question.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Arif. And anyone else? If you want to deliver the question, you can use the raise hand feature. Okay. If no one, I will read the question in the room chat maybe. Okay, maybe directly, Mr. Mila, you can answer the question first.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Ari, for your question. I'm happy that you have good impression of Russian people. Actually, you're absolutely right that the Western media provides a very bad image of Russia. And it didn't start in February. If you remember, it has started quite a time ago when anything bad happens in the world, Russia is behind. Do you remember this alleged chemical attacks in Syria, or chemical attacks against some Russian nationals in Great Britain, or an opposition blogger Alexei Navalny that was allegedly poisoned by a chemical weapon. So you see, or even interference in the elections in the United States. I wish we could elect the US president. Unfortunately, we cannot. Yeah, so this didn't happen just yesterday. And the reason why it happens and why the Western media portray Russia as such a bad way, I've already explained. We have an existential differences with the West because we don't agree with the moral right of West to dominate the world and to use human rights issue or economic weapons or economic sanction as a weapon against the countries that the West don't like. You know, we all remember what happened in Iraq, for instance, when under false pretense, Iraq was practically torn apart, or Libya. Okay, Libya was not the most democratic of countries, but it was a prosperous country where people lived in peace. Now it is in a state of civil war. People are dying every day. So this kind of treatment, if the West doesn't like this or that leader, then they try to create a bad image and then to use some false pretense to attack this country. Why we cannot counter and what is our response? Actually, we're trying to do that, but all the media are in the hands of the Western government. Actually, they're blocking Russian media that were trying to provide an alternative point of view. You know, Russia Today was blocked in United States, in Europe, so they're just trying to prevent. And what about the freedom of speech? What about human rights again? Because the information has been monopolized by the West. If you want to know, we have, please look at the website of our embassy or our social media embassies. We provide a lot of information on what is untrue and what are the fakes that are being distributed in the Western media. But it's very difficult to make a hole, so to say, in this information wall, or to counter this information, not even information war, it's an information terror launched against Russia. Again, the response of the West is absolutely unproportional, I would say. The recent one is that Russian tennis players are banned from participating in the Wimbledon. What has the crisis in Ukraine has to do with Wimbledon and tennis players? Why are the people discriminated because of their nationality? What is it? It's racism? What is it? Where are the human rights in all this? Even our cats, Russian cats, were prevented from taking part in a cat competition, international competition. This is absurd. Okay, when for 8 years people were dying in Donetsk and Lugansk, where was this hysterical reaction from the West? Why no sanctions were imposed against Kyiv? Because the government in Kyiv was never and is not really independent. They just are puppets in the hand of Washington and Brussels. That's the main reason. If you obediently follow the orders from US and their allies, you can do whatever you wish. But if you try to oppose this hegemony, Western, then you're the bad guy. Again, if you look at the facts, what country attacked in the last 30 years, military attacked around 30 foreign countries? It's not Russia, it's not China, it's the United States. But Russia and China are portrayed as the very bad guys in all the Western media. So if you are interested in having information what is happening, please follow the social media, our posts of the embassy in the social media. We post a lot of interesting information that does not correspond with what the Western media are saying. Thank you for this question. And I see another question, if I may read. Yeah, Ms. Fitra, on the response of the Russian people to the current conflict. I've already mentioned that there is an overwhelming support of from Russians to the over the policy of our president and government. Of course, there are people who don't agree. There are some people who left our country because they don't agree. They have the perfect right to do so, but the vast majority of ordinary Russian people do support, because very unlike people in the West, we know what was happening in Lugansk and Donetsk for these 8 years. We know what was happening in Ukraine for this 8 years, how everything Russian was oppressed, how people suffered actually. And we know that Ukraine has been turned into an anti-Russia project. If you think that, that it doesn't hurt, it hurts. Of course, we sympathize a lot with Ukrainian people. And of course, the military option is never the best, but in some cases, you don't have any option left. We tried to prevent this crisis from happening for 8 years. And if I may also comment on what my esteemed co-speaker said about the Ukraine wanting to join NATO, it's not the Ukrainian people who wanted to join NATO. Actually, it was the West who was dragging Ukraine into NATO. And of course, you know why we feel so threatened by this development, because actually, if we look 30 years back, when Gorbachev agreed on the reunification of Germany in 1989 and agreed to withdraw our troops from Eastern Germany in response, and actually to dissolve the Warsaw Pact, in response, NATO promised not to expand to our borders. Did the Western leaders fulfill their promises? No. There were 5 rounds of expansion towards our border. Again, it's not Russia that is bringing its missiles closer to, say, Paris or London or Brussels or Washington. No, it's NATO that is trying to bring their military infrastructure towards our borders. How can we not feel threatened by that? And the red line for us was Ukraine. And we told that, we've been telling it for decades to the West. They don't want to listen. Because you look at the map, Ukraine is not such a small country. Actually, it's the biggest country in the Europe after Russia. It's bigger than France. And we have a 2,000-kilometer border with Ukraine. If NATO brings its arms and troops to the border with Ukraine, it means a missile shot from the border with Ukraine will reach Moscow in 2 minutes. How can we not feel threatened by that? So Russian people do support operation. It is hurtful. It is, we really sympathize with Ukrainians. That's why we receive refugees from Ukraine. Around 1 million already are in Russia. But we have no other option to survive our country, to protect our country, and to protect people in Lugansk and Donetsk, of course. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mila. Maybe the last question, we have Mr. Ye Pratama. Please, for the question.
Okay, please wait. Thank you for the time you have given. Good afternoon. Peace, greeting to all of us. I may ask the Russian ambassador, is there a special problem with Ukraine that the world does not know about widely? Because I have a friend in Russia, her name is Angelina. She said the Ukraine's position threatens Russia. Maybe I can you explain about that? Thank you.
Okay, maybe directly, I will give chance one person again, Miss Rafinka Saula. You can give the question, please.
Thank you, Kafitra, and good afternoon, ma'am. I believe that the actions that the West, and by them I mean the US and all NATO counterparts, have taken towards Russia is an unnecessary intervention. And then my question is, how do you think this matter with Ukraine will end? Because President Putin has made it clear for the West to not intervene and further create threat to his country and his people. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Kafitra.
Thank you, Miss Rafinka. I think all of the question to Miss Mila. Okay, you can answer, Miss. Time is yours.
Sure. I think I've already mentioned how we saw the threat. Basically, the threat comes not from Ukraine itself. The threat from the West that has turned Ukraine into an anti-Russian project. In this crisis, Ukraine is a victim, and it's a tragedy. And it's the fault of the West that, with their unreasonable policies, they have dragged Ukrainian people into this tragedy. Of course, how could we not feel threatened by, as I told you, the prospect of the NATO infrastructure coming to our borders from Ukrainian territory? Again, have you heard about the biolabs, the biolaboratories that was built in Ukraine in the last 30 years? More than 30 biolaboratories controlled by Pentagon, controlled by the Americans. What they were doing there? And we have documents that they were working on producing very toxic pathogens to be released. That's biological weapons, basically, and biological weapons are banned in the world. And all over the world, there are around 300 biolabs built by the United States. There was one in Indonesia. You know that? Namru 2, and fortunately for Indonesia, it was closed in 2010. But most of these biolaboratories actually are along the borders with Russia. So against whom all these researches that were done in these laboratories were directed? And it's not just ungrounded accusations from Russia. It was acknowledged by the United States officially that they do have these biolabs in Ukraine. So you see, how can we not feel threatened by that? Or the statement by Zelensky, president of Ukraine, that Ukraine wished to have nuclear arms. And I can tell you, Ukraine is a developed country. They have the potential, they have the intellectual potential, the industrial potential to create a nuclear arm. Of course, it's a threat. So that's what the West was also turning a blind eye to. On the contrary, instigating all this kind of things in Ukraine. So of course we felt threatened. On the second question on the unnecessary intervention and how will it end? No, it was not unnecessary. It was the only option that was left for Russia to be sure that in the years to come, there will be no threat from Ukraine, through Ukraine, I would say, from the West, and that Ukraine will be a neutral, at least neutral or a friendly country. we don't want to have war with Ukrainians. We want to live in peace with Ukrainian, but the operation will go on until we reach the targets that have been identified by the president. If the Ukrainians are ready to sign an agreement with Russia, of course, it will speed up the things and it will make the operation shorter. So basically, the ball is on the Ukrainian side. Thank you. I'm really sorry, but I have just another 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Lumila. Maybe you can directly closing statement.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to this webinar and for me to be able to explain Russia's position on a very important thing. I'm very grateful also to my esteemed co-speaker for his very interesting presentation and for very interesting questions. I hope that clarified for those who were attending this webinar the position of Russia and Russian policy. Again, we're very appreciative of the position of Indonesia and the attitude of Indonesian people who we see as our very good friends and partners. Thank you so much. And
thank you, Mr. Mila, for the closing statement. And I will invite Mr. Ahmad Hoilur Furqan to give us the closing statement.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fitra Juniati, and nice to know you, Ms. Ludmila, as an ambassador of Russian Embassy for Indonesia. And my conclusion here is I understand that Russia's reason in this case is to give balancing power to NATO, and they want to expand into area close to Russia. And for Indonesia, I think we should give something important after the G20 event is held. For now, we can only do diplomacy because the G20 is an association of cooperation in economic matters, not security or military issue. For the United States, once we can discuss with them how the best, because Indonesia cannot decline the attendance of Russian president. I mean, this is President Putin. But for Russia, we wish you as a big country want to make some communication to the United States and some alliance how to end this war. I do not blame Russia, but we as a society only wants a peace in the world. We cannot do many things. This is we only a society because it's high politics and every policy made by our government, our governance. Thank you. That's my conclusion.
Thank you, Mr. Furqan, for the closing statement. I will give